I'm just kidding. What can we learn about living the good life by studying the lives of Socrates and Alcabiades? Today, we tend to think about the good life in terms of very simple, often materialistic terms. This is bad because the outlook has proven disastrous. This outlook has proven disastrous in the past. Instead, we should look to the example of Socrates and his understanding of education as a foundation of virtue, rather than the source of financial or political success. Socrates and Alcabiades represent drastically different approaches to living the good life. Socrates pursued virtuous Socrates pers- Socrates pursued virtue via learning, while Alcabiades pursued pleasure and success. Their their respective differences offer insights to what the good life is and how to live in them, from the lives they lived, the works they accomplished, and the way they met their ends. Point 1. The lives they lived. A quote by Mark Catrano says, Alcabiades was born in 451 BC, the son of Athenian politician Cleinias. Alcabiades was the nephew of Pericles and spent his childhood in the home of his famous uncle. He was rebellious, and when the teacher at school told him to play the flute, he decided not to because he thought it was stupid, and others in the class dropped it as well, and eventually that school stopped teaching how to play the flute because of him. Socrates was a member of the upper middle class, and his father was a sculptor or statesman. Wait. So, yeah. Anyway. Later, Socrates married Xanthippe. He claimed to learn speaking and writing from Aspasia of Miletus, which was not true. He was also very ugly, whereas Alcabiades was extremely handsome. Yeah. Socrates is actually so ugly that he's one of the most ugly people in the world. Cool. The works they accomplished. After his service in the war, he devoted his time to his favorite pastime, the pursuit of truth. His represent as a philosopher spread all over Athens, and when he was told the oracle of Delphi said he was the wisest man in Athens, he responded by trying to prove the oracle wrong, and decided to see if anyone knew what was truly worthwhile in life. He finally realized that he might be the wisest in Athens because he did not pretend to know something he didn't. In 415 BC, Alcabiades gave a speech to persuade the Athenians to have military attack in Sicily over one reason, we believe, is to get the timber of Sicily, a very important material for the navy. He argued that the mixed race in the political insurrection would make a strong attack unlikely. In the end, he won the majority vote and the two generals went to war. One reason he said for war was to become a great man. In a poor series of events, things happened that made Alcabiades look like a traitor. He was proven guilty in court and given the death sentence. He eventually fled to Sparta instead of facing what he had to do. He told Sparta of the Athenians' battle plans, and Spartan sided with Persia, and Alcabiades became the general. Quote by Alcabiades says, Yet great men leave behind them a reputation for the age that leads others who are not related to them to claim them as their ancestor in the pride of their country. And that was what Alcabiades wanted to go for. Point 3, the way they met their ends. As Socrates became older and his students successful, many of them went into politics. Their views tended to be anti-democratic, and the result, Athens grew disasterful. Later, charges were up against him for atheism and corrupting the youth. Found guilty, he said he should be awarded a prize rather than a punishment. This led him to be sentenced to death, just for being sarcastic. He died by drinking poison. The final years of Alcabiades were a roller coaster, and after fleeing Sparta, He ended up in Persia, where he became the slave of Scorates. Eventually, the two went back and made their way to Sparta, where he was treated as the prodigal son. This was set back to when he stirred after this lost the battle of Euphis. Alcabiades was fired from his position and chief general and went into voluntary exile, as his home was in Thrace. As the Peloponnesian War began to wind down, Sparta was winning. Athens waged and lost one last battle. Alcabiades warned against it, but he wanted to be around it. It was a disaster, and they decided to blame Alcabiades for it and banish him again. This time he took refuge with a Persian soldier and was making his way back to Persia. His luck eventually ran out, and a team of assassins killed him with 15 arrows. Socrates and Alcabiades shared so much in common, but pursued life in such different ways. What can we learn from the example and how we should live our lives? A quote by Plato says, "This was the end of our friend, the best, the wisest, the most upright man that I have ever known." End quote. So although today we tend to think of the good life in terms of very simple, often materialistic terms, this is horrifying because this outlook has proven disastrous in the past. Instead, we should look to the example of Socrates and his understanding of education as the foundation of virtue rather than the source of financial or political success. Socrates and Alcabiades represent drastically different approaches to living the good life. Socrates pursued virtue via learning, while Alcabiades pursued pleasure and success. Their respective differences offer insight to what the good life is and how to live it, from the lives they lived, the work they accomplished, and the ways they met their ends. Thank you.